So welcome everybody. Seeing as this is a panel discussion today, we welcome your questions. So we will be using the Q&A feature of Google Meet, and Chris will show a slide shortly. Yep, there we go. Yep, and give you a chance to see where it is. It's down where the activities button is. You've got the triangle, the square, and the circle, and you can post your questions there, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. So my name is Kirsty Miller and I'm DiUS's Head of Partnerships. And just quickly, for those of you who are new to DiUS, although there are very many familiar faces on this call today, which is lovely to see. So DiUS is an Australian consultancy who help our customers innovate and grow using emerging technology. This covers, digital data and devices, which we tie together by experience and service design. So this is the subject of today's Lunch and Learn. So firstly, a little bit of context. Service design is one of those things that sometimes I think is not well understood within the industry and can mean many different things to many people. So service design is all about creating those end-to-end customer experiences. We want to create end-to-end customer experiences that are frictionless, cohesive and consistent. And if we think about today's customer experiences, most of them involve multiple touch points which cross physical spaces and also digital technology. So if you think about picking up your click and collect grocery order, there's a whole bunch of people and processes and different stages that are involved, not just for you, but for the people behind the scenes who deliver the services and make sure everything happens seamlessly. And one of the things that I guess you need to make a distinction between experience design and user experience is that service design does include or thinks about all of those stakeholders, such as members of staff. So it's really all about people, processes, as well as obviously the technology that enables the frictionless and the transformative experiences. And I guess, why are we talking about service design today? Well, with more organizations increasing their digital maturity, that was happening before the pandemic. But I think, you'd have to be living under a rock not to notice that we've really had to change dramatically the way that we do things. And in this strange new world where we can't be physically present, in a lot of situations. And that's really caused this massive acceleration of digital transformation. And, we've really noticed our clients increasingly having to think about, the end-to-end customer journey to reinvent how people engage with services. So, given it's so topical, we thought that we would come together today and have a panel discussion. And it's really this area where you're reinventing or trying to transform or make something better, where service design comes into its own. And, it's something that we expect to keep growing in demand. So, this is, again, a reason why it's very important to discuss it. So we see consumers' expectations changing even faster and faster, even faster still. And things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, all of those things are enabling experiences that weren't possible before. And then we're living in this time where we've got the sense of urgency or the impetus to change. So it's a really good time for us to be having this discussion where both there's a reason to change and there's also the technology to enable it. So today we're going to be discussing some common challenges associated with service design, such as knowing where to start and what to consider when implementing new technology and how to overcome some of these challenges that we're faced with. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel. I've already introduced myself, but Alex, we're very fortunate to have Alex here from Lifeblood. So Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for that, Kirsty. Apologies, my voice is a little bit crap today, thanks to a cold. I run the innovation team at Red Cross Lifeblood. I've been there for about 2.9 years. So I still consider myself new. There's a lot to learn about the business. Our team a kind of like a support group for the rest of the organization. And while we ourselves aren't directly responsible for the customer experience, whether it's the digital side or the donor service side, we actually work very closely with the teams and support them right through from the research, the problem establishment phase, right through to test and learn.
Great. Thanks, Alex. And thank you again for joining us today. It's really lovely for us to have you here. Next, Tom, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, all. I'm Tom. I'm a principal consultant at DiUS in the experience and design team. So I guess we do a lot of different work at DiUS, as Kirsty was saying. But I think there's sort of three core pillars of how we do things: product, engineering, and design. And that might be with a service design bent, or it might be on a more focused experience design bent. I think this is sort of something we're getting into. We're looking at the physical and digital, obviously, but that feeds into sort of our IoT work. That feeds into a lot of the things we're bumping in, talking about thinking a little bit bigger than just an app that it needs to be built, but how people are using it, where they're using it, how does it fit into people's workflows, their lives, etc.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's a really big focus for you guys at the moment, particularly, I would say, with our IoT and machine learning work. It really changes how people interact with products and services. So yeah, it's a very interesting space, one to watch. And then lastly, but obviously not leastly, Mr. Pete Cohen, would you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Kirsty. Hi, everyone. I'm Pete. So I'm a principal consultant at DiUS across product and delivery. So as Tom mentioned, we've got the various aspects to what we do in DiUS with a lot of talented engineers and designers. In my role, it's around helping to understand our customers' needs and unlock the real potential, the capabilities of our team to help meet those. So, in this engagement, there was a focus on the Internet of Things and the engineering side, as well as the service design side. So part of my role is helping to facilitate the engagement and herd cats and just keep things moving and help us get to that outcome.
Great, thanks, Pete. Okay, so we're going to be talking about service design, but we're also going to be talking about service design through the lens of some recent work that we partnered with Lifeblood to complete. So they asked DiUS to deliver a contactless self-service experience during the coronavirus pandemic. And I think we'll probably start with Pete, you doing a little bit of scene setting and explaining just a little bit about what our work alongside Lifeblood looked like. So Pete, and obviously Alex, feel free to jump in as well.
Thanks, Kirsty. Yeah, and just for context, this engagement happened around about 12 months ago, and I was part of the team that delivered that solution. So hence why I'm well placed to give this initial context. And I guess, it's kind of perhaps fitting now in Melbourne, at least. We're pretty much at the end of it, having just come out of hopefully our last lockdown. We'll see. But either way, 12 months ago, it was a very different time that I think we can all probably recall and relate to, when things were very heightened and very uncertain and changing constantly in terms of the landscape that we were dealing with as we learned about what was going on. So Lifeblood contacted us because they had a need to be able to measure people's temperature as they were coming into the donor centres, and one of the key things that we recall was the impact that was having on staff. So both from a resourcing point of view, it was taking people away from their day-to-day jobs, which had a staffing impact. It was putting people at risk because before the screening process was complete to ascertain whether someone had a high temperature, staff were already coming into contact. And it was also causing repetitive strain injury by using the temperature guns and needing to lean over counters and those kinds of things was putting staff at risk in that way. So there was a host of issues that that were brought to us. And then, in terms of DiUS, having our not only digital but our Internet of Things capability, knowing that this would involve a physical device as well as the design component, and there being a lot to it. And at that time, we were actually considering whether, because it's a two-part process, there's the temperature scanning, but also some pre-screening questions. So it was an open question that we went into the process with of, would this be some combined device or a digital experience, a manual experience? That was part of what we needed to navigate. And as Kirsty mentioned, taking into consideration a lot of different stakeholders and factors, Lifeblood being a national organisation, whatnot. I'm sure Alex will fill in more of those details of the kinds of things that we needed to look at. But yeah, it was basically involved, iterative process of understanding the need, looking at devices, their capabilities, designing a solution, getting feedback, procuring a device, and getting it rolled out. And that's the journey we'll be, delving into more during this discussion. But I guess, just one of the key things I'd like you to try and keep in mind is the uncertainty and the amount of flux that was going on at that time when, all of us, we couldn't buy toilet paper. There was planes weren't coming into the country in terms of, supplies around stuff. There was, I don't think many people had thought about temperature scanning, 6 months prior to what we were dealing with, whereas suddenly there was a lot of new organisations offering these capabilities. So that was the context of what we were navigating. And then just in terms of where we got to, it was through that iterative process, a really well received solution. Through the pilot, we got great feedback from the donors, having no concerns with having their temperature taken in that way, and likewise with staff being really satisfied with that result and achieving those efficiency gains that we're going for.
Yep, great. Thank you, Pete. That's a really great summary of our work there, and we'll dive into certain aspects as we move forward with the discussion. So Alex, before I move on to my first question for you, I just wanted to check whether or not you had anything to add to the little summary that Pete provided.
Yeah. No, that's a good wrap up, Pete. I think it was interesting that at that point in time within the organization, there was a lot of anxiety because there was so much unknown. At that point in time, when it came to COVID, when it came to screening, when it came to temperature checks, it's like, well, was that the best thing that we could do at the time? It's the only thing we understood at the time. And then it was a case of how do we adopt and trial new technology before we roll it out nationally? Because that's a massive thing to actually go, here's something that we think is the right thing. And we've got a culture where we want to get it right, and we need to get it right. In a way, it's very important, just the way the regulations work. Our duty to donors and the government means that we need to experiment in a controlled fashion. So this was a great example of, in a compressed period of time, because we had internal pressures, and then there was the public perception that we had to deal with as well. What are you guys doing about COVID? How are you protecting donors? This is like a high pressure situation where we did need to apply some learning as part of that process. And I think, you guys helped us out quite well there in terms of not all of our stakeholders are so familiar with what might a test and learn approach look like, and how do we not jump in and roll it out nationally before we've actually taken some learnings on board and stopped and paused and considered?
Yeah. And I guess that kind of links in really nicely, your national focus and then somewhat unfamiliarity with rolling this out. I mean, you can't underemphasize what a big deal this was. So, I guess you really already spoke to some of this, but you in a sense are introducing digital technology to physical environments, like the Lifeblood Donor Centre. And, you have this big emphasis on person-person interactions. So, you know, taking that decision was not something you did lightly. Do you want to explain a little bit about how you supported that shift within the organization, and you know, what was behind the decision to actually do that?
Is that for me? Sorry.
That's for you,
Yeah,
Alex.
sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, that is for you. I'm sorry.
I think it's good to remember that COVID was quite the accelerator for digital, quite the accelerator. So a lot of these digital physical interactions, technologies existed in the business before, and it was almost like we needed some sort of catalyst to go, okay, now it's time to try them out, because it wasn't like there wasn't a great desire internally to experiment, to try new things. But we did need that catalyst to sort of say, now's the time. So I think that really, I think internally there was I think we were all amazed at how quickly we could make a decision, you know, given a crisis situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that. And I think that links to a bigger discussion about innovation more broadly, Alex. You know, those constraints like really make you move forward in quite a stunningly efficient fashion.
Yes.
And yes, and so I think there's a lot to unpack under that, which is not the focus for today's discussion. But, you know, I think it's a lesson for all of us about how to propel innovation forward in our organizations more successfully. Like, we should not, you know, lose sight of the lessons that we learnt.
And that's the challenge, though, isn't it? That look how great we were during a pandemic. How do we adopt those behaviors as part of BAU moving?
Yes, and it is such a challenge, and there's definitely a lot to unpack there. I feel that very strongly, Alex. Okay, so you know, we're in a situation where we're creating this environment to change. You know, Lifeblood, we're like, we've got to do this. But obviously, we've heard from Alex about how important it is for, you know, you need to get it right. So this could come to you, Tom. A big part of service design is providing customers with this consistent experience to get it right, as Alex said. So how can you ensure you're meeting the wants and needs of your customers across this consistent experience you're delivering across every touch point?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsty. I mean, it's a big challenge, right? And you know, having worked with Lifeblood, all the donor centers are, you know, just a little bit different in different locations, slightly different environments. I mean, you can't possibly try and cater and customize for every single one, but trying to take a light touch approach and have a light process that you could put on top of a donor entering that donor center is really important. And I think it comes back to that sort of speed that was part of this. You know, with everything we do at DiUS, you know, we try and take a lean approach, and it's kind of worked especially well here, sort of aligning on the sort of expectations and what's needed, the sort of assumptions that we already have about what might be happening, or processes, or you know, environments. Going out and observing and immersing ourselves in the donor centers where possible to understand the environment, the entry points, the touch points needed, talking to reception, getting the actual sort of information straight from the mouths of people working in the centers. You know, almost already testing that against the assumptions that are being made, and very quickly trying to assess. You know, there's that technical piece that is in parallel, assessing the systems, assessing the hardware. You know, starting to sketch, diagram, figure out how people are going to come into the donor center. Where are they stopping? Where should we place the temperature checker? I think there's a million decisions that have got to be made, but really understanding the environment and the common touch points really gives you something that can be, you know, you can figure out where to intercept, where to insert, you know, where to interrupt, to create that consistency. You know, you really do want a smooth process. You want it to be pretty seamless, and that doesn't happen straight off. You know, like we mentioned, there's that test and learn process from a trial into a pilot into rolling it out, and at each stage you're going to have to adjust slightly because you're always going to be learning something new, and there's always going to be something unexpected.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point, Tom, because, you know, when we talk about service design, I think, you know, some people on the call will be familiar with this, some people won't, but they talk about this idea of a service blueprint that you come up with, and it involves all the people, the processes, all the things we've talked about, and it supports something, I guess, really like a national rollout, getting it right, like Alex said. But I think what people, you know, what was a bit unique about this one was that the design and the technology happened at the same time. So we designed and built or delivered the solution at the same time. And I think, you know, in other circumstances, quite often they're a bit separate, aren't they? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. And I think this is where service design often gets criticized. You know, the holy artifact that lives on the wall and talks to the service and how it's meant to work, versus, you know, how does it actually work? I mean, I think, you know, key to all the work we do is the three lenses of desirability, viability, feasibility. So for each discovery, tech is on the journey, as well as design, as well as product, trying to tick off on the three levels of thinking there. You know, there's no point in designing the perfect seamless service if the hardware can't support it, if it's going to be slow, if it can't get network connection, if, like, there's all these things that, you know, we've really got to try and hammer out. It's the same as when we're designing for you know, a screen-based solution. You know, you want to understand your constraints, and you want to design you know, and create within them to create that successful experience again.
Yeah, and I think that concept of you know, what you were talking about, you bring a cross-functional approach, you design, but you also test at various points, you know, and that was going back to what Alex was saying, the test and learn. I feel like that was not only like a unique part of what we helped Lifeblood to do, but also a big determinant of its success, you know, because
Absolutely.
So many unknowns. But, you know, in life, there's so many unknowns as well, right? I mean, you know, I just think of, you know, back to, you know, when we all started buying things online, I don't know, fair while back now, I was always like, oh, I'm not going to buy clothes online, right, Tom? Because I don't want to have to return them, you know, because it was always such a process. But they've transformed the entire thing now. So I'm like, if it doesn't fit me, I'm just going to send it back, because they've made it so easy, you know? And I think that's just an example of how you can really just change something and then change someone's perceptions.
Exactly. That's taking that human-centered approach, that unmet need, the understanding the pain of the return process. You know, why does it have to take so long? Why can't I just drop it back at the post office and have it, you know, magically appear back in my account, or they just send out another one? Like, this is that new focus on the customer and really trying to understand what is needed and building your business around it. Because the better the service you can provide, the better customer experience you're going to have, the more likely someone is meant to come back.
Yeah, and just going back to the Lifeblood situation, like, so, you know, you had to examine the whole process from the time that someone goes, I want to make a donation. What happens from that point where they say, I want to make a donation, and then through to when they leave the donor center, you know, and then you also don't just have to consider the customer. Again, we go back to, you have to consider the staff, and all of the different things that happen. So
there's the three, you know, people, processes, and props are the you know, the three sort of pieces of every service. And, you know, it's not easy trying to get map all of that out, but it does give you that cohesive view. You know, like you say, from the beginning that trigger point of, maybe I've received my reminder about my donation, or I'm booking. How do we kind of preempt, explain what's going to happen, all the way through, sort of keep people aware, and especially at the time this was at, make it something that's non-threatening. Like,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Everyone's trying to adjust.
And just to echo a word that Alex mentioned previously in the Lifeblood context, but which is the regulation. And I think service design is often used in regulated environments where it's not just building the most customer-friendly digital experience where you don't have those considerations, but there's timing factors, there's regulatory requirements that need to be met, and that's obviously a really important part of Lifeblood's business. That
yeah, exactly.
an overlay.
Service designs come from government and health services originally. Like, this is where this whole thing started, and the timing, the regulation, the things you're allowed to do, the things you can't. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, also too, service design, fast food, McDonald's, the alarms that go off when someone's been waiting too long in a queue. I mean, I'm not the only one, surely, that, hears that alarm when you're in the drive-in. But no, that's all based on service design, how McDonald's maps out that repeatable customer experience where people get their food in what they have deemed to be an acceptable time frame. That's exactly what you're talking about, right, Tom? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at its simplest, it's something that helps someone do something. It's at its simplest. Like, the thing that unites all services is that they help us achieve a goal, whether that be big or small. This example is probably not as complex as something like going to Centrelink, but this is the challenges you're going to face.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. That was very insightful. So I wanted to move on to Pete's perspective now. So Pete, I wanted to ask, because obviously this was a bit of a unique project where it included, both digital and, physical actual places, and then also, hardware. What do you need to consider when you're introducing new technologies to physical environments? So, there's a big security angle, I would be thinking, right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Security was a big one. I think Tom touched on before just the diversity of physical environments. So each one of the donor centres has different layouts. There was mobile donor centres that were part of the consideration. Access to power, those kinds of things became part of our landscape that we needed to consider. And I guess just to pick up on a few points that have been made around like test and learn, we've mentioned cross-functional, the iterative nature of the whole process, and that needing to understand the need, but then also look at what's available at the various price points as a whole group, work through the trade-offs, get one step closer to what we think is ideal, and then keep iterating through that process. And we could only do that because we were a cross-functional team with a hardware IoT specialist on the team, versus come up with a design, then maybe go out to tender hoping that someone's going to have the perfect device available in a very constrained environment that we were in at that time. That was the only way that we could achieve it. But just a bit more back to your question, the physical environment factor, we were discovering things like the impact of the glass sliding doors on temperature sensors and those kinds of factors that we needed to work through with the different suppliers. But probably one of the main ones to dwell on for a moment is the security aspect. Obviously for any organization, customer privacy, security, just the reputational risk that can go along with any potential missteps along those lines. And we're dealing with the idea of a device that you walk up to and it takes your temperature. A lot of those types of devices have access control functionality that will open a door for you based on facial recognition, for example. So you might have caught on in the press recently. There was a convenience store who will remain unnamed, but we're using some kind of terminal for doing a survey of some kind, but we're using facial recognition as part of that. And the privacy body came down on them, saying that using someone's face print, as they called it, without their consent ain't cool. So, there's these types of considerations beyond just the problem we had in front of us to solve of we've got to be able to take someone's temperature and get the feedback. We've got to think about, what's the privacy concerns? What are the security concerns in terms of, is this going to be a network connected device? Big trade-offs in there in terms of, well, what if this needs to be updated at any point in the future versus what's involved in connecting it to the network and keeping it secure. And eventually, we arrived at this was better off being a non-connected device because of those considerations. So they were the kinds of things that we needed to work through. And again, a lot of iteration in that, working with the suppliers, working with the stakeholders, assessing risk to arrive at the best outcome.
Yeah, so there's a lot there, isn't there? And I think security, obviously, but reputational risk. I mean, Lifeblood is, such a well-known brand, and it provides such a, an important service to everyone. Correct, Alex?
Yeah, we'd probably be the first ones to we are the first ones at every meeting to go, what would the media say if this went wrong?
Yeah.
And the media can be very quick to jump on Red Cross, whether Red Cross Society or Lifeblood. We see it in social media so much. So I think that's a really interesting dimension to the service design, actually considering regulations. We're not for profit. We've got the brand to protect. There's so many layers there that it's quite multifaceted, and there's a lot to consider beyond a straightforward, let's get the tech working.
Yes. And I think that is an important takeaway that definitely, while those things are always important, they were, more so in this case. Okay, well, I wanted to now, unless anybody from our panel had, wanted to comment on something that someone else had said, I wanted to now to turn our attention to questions. And I see we have one. Let's go look at that.
Hey, James.
Yeah. Who or how did you get a perspective on the breadth of devices available to support your goals? Pete, I think this one's for you.
Sorry, I just missed.
Who or how did you get a perspective on the breadth of devices available to support your goals?
Market scanning in terms of, we had some existing, contacts that would work within similar spaces, but it was that moment when a lot of people had jumped on this trend. So you could do some Google searches and find some, websites of various degrees of basedness, depending on how long they'd been around, because some people had just sprung up overnight and started importing devices. It was a big desk research kind of a piece to start with of, getting a long list, contacting those suppliers. A big question was how soon could they get product into the company at scale? And I think that's probably another dimension to this whole engagement, but probably more typically with service design generally. Like, for sure, you could be doing service design in a startup context, but more likely you're doing it in a more established organizational context, where you're looking at an existing service, which means you've got to hit the ground running at scale. So we of course did a pilot with one or two devices, but then we had to be confident that we could quickly turn on the tap to the 100+ centres nationally and have a plan for getting those devices out there, procured and installed. So it was that basic desk research process, but then to reiterate that cross-functional capability that we had and and the whole team involved in that. So while it was Zoran and I probably mainly focused on our big list of technical questions, we were also involving our experienced designer in that process of understanding the implications of those trade-offs, socializing that with the further stakeholders as we whittled down that list, versus come up with a list of requirements and then go to market and hope that you could meet them. It was much more iterative.
Okay, I think that is a good one. I hope that's answered the question for you, James. If not, please post another one or ask a follow-up. You're more than welcome to. And now on to the next question. So I guess this is really for all of the panel. You know, how can you work out what problems can be solved with service design? So what's, you know, when do you use it? When don't you?
Good,
Well, I
question.
guess, have you got a problem that involves multiple people in doing multiple things? You know, not focused on a single touch point, I think is where you probably need to start thinking about as a service design problem.
Yeah, and I mean, it just really goes to, maybe it's for Alex. Alex, you didn't come to us and say, DiUS, please, can you help us and to use service design? Like, that wasn't it. You came to us with a business problem and we reached into our experience and our approaches and, you know, we kind of helped you solve your problem.
Yeah, I think in this instance, it's a case of there's a gap in there was a gap in capability within the business. We, the innovation team, we were busy, you know, working on some other things at the same time. We're a very small team. We don't have a very mature service design capability across the business. Technology are usually bolted down to BAU maintenance sort of activities. So it came to one of those situations where it's a unique situation of high urgency, new area to explore, but there was a very clear mandate. We needed to get something out there, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom, do you have anything to add to that about, you know, the problems? Or Pete?
I think it's an interesting intersection. Like, I think back to probably almost a decade ago now, but when I was a very traditional business analyst, which is sort of where I started in my tech career, and we would do process maps, that kind of thing, which I think there's some crossover, but that's a much more narrow lens that doesn't typically have as much of a customer view or access. That was sort of from a different context, but where there is all of those touch points and processes to work through, I think that points to something that's going to benefit from bringing this multi-dimensional way of looking at it. It's not just user interface design. It's not just interviewing customers about what they would need or like, and it's not just doing process design. It's really all of those things at once, iteratively working through.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've heard service designers called the BAs of the future, which for a good or bad term, it's taking that human customer perspective and almost looking in towards the business, rather than the BAs traditionally were really inside the business and facing inwards as well, trying to really kind of understand what's happening, but maybe forgetting about what's happening out of the building as much. I think there's probably a lot of discussion. It's a loaded statement, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. One of the, sorry, Kirsty,
No,
I was just going to say, one of the, just in terms of this question, what problems can be solved with this? And some of the things you mentioned, Kirsty, about like when things go wrong, it's like whether it's your return thing or your food arriving late, but that's such a important moment in a customer relationship between an organization and their customers. It's one thing to design the process when things are going right, and we've got to do that, but then to think about, well, how do we avoid things going wrong? Or and as is always the case, it's handoffs and when different groups are coming together, or those kinds of things where the risk and problems usually arise. So I'm thinking back to we're working with an energy company who are working with a device that involved manufacturing and then installers needing to pick them up and take them off and get them on site with customers, and through each of those handoffs, the things that could go wrong. And that was an example of where service design probably would have been really valuable, because no one seemed to really have that holistic view. Everyone had their patch in mind, and they kind of knew of other areas, but had anyone really been given the time and the access to be able to say, okay, well, this is exactly how things are handed off, and these are perhaps where some of the gaps emerge, and can we design to overcome those gaps? If you're in a really narrow, just a digital type environment, maybe you're going to get less benefit from going through this kind of process. But where there's lots of parties and particularly physical handoffs, I think that's where you're going to see some real benefits.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Pete. And I think it leads directly into the next question we have, which is Adam's. So I think Adam's question is all around, like, how do you make the case for it within your organization when a business has leaders who feel their purpose is perfectly good? Do you have a methodology for finding out where the weaknesses lie? Sounds like the start of that question is where there are those trade-offs, and obviously presumably you'd be catching metrics and so on that show where there is a big gap. Okay, Pete?
Yeah, for sure. And hi, Adam, by the way, good to have you here. And look, I think that perhaps there's that thing of when there's silos, or everyone's looking after their own patch and feel like that's perfectly good, but maybe people don't always get that more holistic view of from the customer lens, or perhaps where some of the things are falling through. So I think that's generally part of our approach at DiUS, something that we find a way to bring pretty immediate value to organizations, is just to get people talking that don't usually interact and share their experience and perspectives around these kinds of things. And as soon as that starts happening, these opportunities start to emerge. So I think doing that in a sort of empathetic, non-threatening way, and using visualization techniques, that's I guess another big part of the service design process, is creating that visualization that tells the story. And you can at least, well, hopefully from today, stand around a wall and look at that, or however you do it, but unlock that information and those insights so that you can then start talking about where those gaps and pain points and opportunities exist. Because in my experience, often people are too busy, too focused, perhaps to be able to see that broader picture of what's going on inside their organization.
Yeah.
Could I just
add? Sorry.
there you go, Tom.
I think we're talking about trying to find where the weaknesses lie. I think every business is usually pretty confident that they're doing the right things, but I guess sometimes it's about taking that assumption that you are doing the right thing and actually testing it. I've also not seen many businesses that aren't swayed by the stories of their customers or people interacting with their business, and hearing about the difficulties. It's very hard to ignore those kind of things coming from the ground level. Maybe it's a sign of friction or inefficiency or whatever it may be, but those human customer stories are always really persuasive.
Alex?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it depends on how much you believe that this is the right thing to fix, and how much of a battle you're up for. And this comes down to influencing as well, because it depends on what process they think is perfectly good. I'd agree with Tom that quite often a disarming way to present a case is simply to put the customer in front of them, whether it's a recording, a video. I don't know if you remember, James, back at Medibank in the old days, some of the guys would just go onto the street with their phones that do not a mock interview, that actually interview someone on the street, record 10 interviews, chop them up, put it in front of the manager, and there you go. It's like, hey, we're not saying it. This is what they're saying. This is how they're feeling. Or it could be a case of, let's record some people walking in and out of a donor center just for internal video purposes. And that's a great way to go, oh, look, someone's getting stuck at that door. There's something about the entrance which is not right or wrong. That's a nice way to do it in a way that doesn't look like I'm trying to be smarter than you or I'm trying to prove you wrong or anything, but it just says that maybe there's something here we can investigate further. So that's a nice soft way to do it. But as Pete said as well, visualizing it is great, even if it's a lo-fi journey map. You don't know, just a few points here. Look, we've had some conversations, talked to our staff. Here's what we've mapped out. We think there's something here? Would you like to investigate a bit further? And that may be enough. And then, of course, you can ramp it up. You can get data and all that sort of thing. But that's that balance between building your case and whether or not you believe it's the right thing to do as well.
I think those are really good tips. Definitely things that are good to think about. So there's another question here for Alex, which is from James, saying there's no doubt lots of opportunities to innovate in Lifeblood, especially with COVID. So I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but James has asked, what made this the right one to focus on the time? You've already talked about gaps. You knew you had to do something and there was a gap. What else was there sitting underneath that decision?
Good question, James. It's something we ask ourselves all the time as well. Is this the right problem to solve? Because we get thrown problems from individual teams, from divisions, where there's problems on the strategic roadmap. Where do you begin? And often it's a case of which one is top of mind for a divisional executive at that point in time. Which one is the one that the media is going to come across on? So which one is the most strategic one? It depends on the timing, but due to COVID, it was a case of a very clear organizational mandate in a situation where continuing operations was the number one concern. So any situation where our staff as well were going to become sick and therefore would have to close down centres, and therefore resulting in a reduction in blood supply at a time when potentially you needed more blood supply, or more consistent blood supply. That would have been critical and top of mind. So that's what would have brought it to the top of the list in terms of maintaining the security of the blood supply.
Yeah, that's sorry.
Add one other dimension that I sort of recall from the time is that there was a commercial aspect to it as well, because needing to add an extra staff member to the roster, that was part of what they were grappling with, because someone needed to be on the other side of the counter to stop them leaning over, or depending on the configuration of the center. So I think that always helps as well. Like there's always the vitamin versus the painkiller kind of analogy. It's always nice to have a vitamin that makes something better, but if there's an immediate sort of pain point that needs resolving, then that often gets pretty immediate attention. And this was certainly a pain point of like the resourcing impact of finding those people and needing to pay for them, or can that be solved with this broader solution that we designed? I think that certainly helped move things along.
That's a really good point.
And it's interesting to think that this is a very sophisticated sort of process and discussion to have here, which stemmed from how on earth do we check the temperature of a donor coming to our center? It sounds simplistic, and yet, there's all these elements of just that example that Pete has said before. You just need to imagine in your head, there's a desk in front of you, you're behind the desk, you're a receptionist, someone comes in, you stand up, you lean over the desk, you need to get close to them, the desk is not narrow, and you're doing that again and again and again and again, hourly, every day. And that's, we've got a big program around safety within the business, and that, you know, repetitive straight injury is a big thing, because of course we've got the laboratories as well. People are picking up and lifting and lifting and moving bags of blood everywhere. So that's a high priority within the business, safety and ensuring staff as well are well looked after.
Yeah, and you know, that's a really good point that you make, Alex. I mean, you know, it sounds, you come with the, you know, how can we statement, and here we are 12 months later, we're having this very sophisticated conversation about something, but that's actually what happens in the moment. You're like, we've got to solve this problem, we've got to get it right. These are all the things, you know, you would have had many discussions with Pete about, like, this can't go wrong, this can't go wrong, this can't go wrong, you know, and you come up with a solution that has worked, which is really great. But I guess really, you know, for people that are wanting to do service design, it's about having it in your kit bag so you can pull it out, and it's one of the things that you employ to actually, you know, solve that problem, right, Tom? It's about having the right processes, the right things at the right time.
Yeah, and just like calibrating your lens a little bit. I think it's, you know, even for myself as a designer who's come from, you know, traditional websites into apps, into IoT, into, like, if each step out that you take, it does take a little bit of a recalibration to be thinking in, you know, each time it's a bigger sphere of what you've got to take in. But I think there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of thinking out there to help you with that. But you know, I think with that sort of cross-functional team approach as well, you know, it's not just the designer doing this.
Yeah, and okay.
One other dynamic within this particular engagement I think is worth perhaps reflecting on and taking forward is that the focus that we were able to achieve on this particular problem, and I could see that being a potential pitfall with service design, where it's also sprawling. And, you know, part of the early conversation with Lifeblood was around, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets here, but, you know, the donor centers is a place of wellness, and there's so much more potential there that you could use technology for. But we were kind of lucky that we had this forcing function that enabled us to focus on the task at hand. And that's a philosophy that we would take through all our engagements, that we want to think big, but also start small and then build from there. But perhaps that's part of it as well. Like, even though, you know, you may be designing a full end-to-end service, you've got to start somewhere, and you can't do it all at once.
Yeah, that's right. And for people who are wanting to start with service design, we've had a question. I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this, Tom, but what is the most in-depth and affordable course on service design you've seen? I know. I know. It's tricky, right?
What's the old, you know, good, fast, cheap? I don't know. Choose two. Look, I think some of our designers have been looking at this recently. The Interaction Design Foundation actually have a pretty good course, which has some good depth to it. It's very practical. The ECOS Institute as well, they do a lot around sort of design facilitation, you know, future thinking and service design as well. So that's another one. You know, there is, you know, uni courses you can do. You know, there's the grad cert at RMIT, which is also pretty accessible. But then I guess it depends sort of, you know, do you want something that's more academic or more practical? I think that some of the online courses that are available now definitely err on the practical side.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I hope that helps the person who asked that question. We've got 2 minutes. So before I wrap and say thank you, there is one more question for Alex. Did the solution get rolled out nationally? What impact did it have? What did you learn? And then Tony popped something in the chat. Where are you, Tony? Can Alex share any details on the outcomes of the solution 12 months on? I don't know if you can fit that into 2 minutes, but give you your best shot, Alex.
I wasn't actually directly on the project, but I went to give blood about 3 weeks ago in Bundoora, and I walked in and there was the solution. So yes, it has been rolled out. It is live, and that was actually my first physical interaction with it. And basically, you walk into the center, and it's got the device showing you yourself, and it works like that. Bang! It shows your temperature. It's like there's no effort required on my part. I didn't have to get taller or skirt down or anything like that. I didn't need to touch anything. It just worked. But yes, it got rolled out, and it was like it was a big success. And of course, it was one of a number of different challenges that we've had throughout COVID. I mean, even now we're not allowed to go back into the office, so we've still got a lot of constraints within the organization. But yeah, no, it was a huge success. It worked out well, and it was important because it helped other stakeholders in the business recognize the process, which is important for me, because then, yes, the innovation team would like to do more of this as well, but then it's good for them to see more often how it's done. And then they see the process, they learn from, they go, oh, actually, maybe we should do that thing again. And that's really important for us, for them to be inspired from different directions.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome outcome. Well, we've got time. I have a feeling we could have talked for way longer, but I would like to thank our panelists, Alex, Pete, and Tom. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom. And thank you to everyone who joined us. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day and a lovely weekend. And enjoy the freedom, Melbourne.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone.